last point of our President's first statement was the African diaspora. So to just take care of the problem, he proposed, I think it was 2 or 3 meetings later, we proposed that the African diaspora be considered the 6th region of the continent. You know, the first time I made the statement that we should consider the African diaspora the 6th region of the continent, people were shocked, they were surprised, and they thought it was something totally ludicrous, something unintelligent, and then they wanted explanation. Because in their mind, we have West Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, North Africa, Southern Africa. So now how can you call the 6th region the African diaspora? So we had to give some explaining that the Caribbean states, Brazil today, African American communities, Africans in Canada, Africans in Europe, they are not only strong and important communities, but they are African people, and they will remain African people for the rest of their life. And they will be African people until the end of history. So we have to find a way to give them their rightful place in rebuilding this continent, number one. Number two, we have a huge interest in having the expertise of African American, African Brazilian, African Canadian, Africans in the Caribbean. That expertise, we need it here in Africa, which they recognize as their motherland. The problem is, do we recognize them as sons and daughters of Africa? And then, when you say, we say it goes more beyond a symbolic act. We are not just saying, let them feel African by calling them 6th region. No. We are saying that we want them to be part of us, part of the decision-making process. And I think that part will be of interest to you. Because in January, if you check the agenda of the African Union Head of States meeting, President Wade has instructed me to send once again a request that we adopt a resolution allowing the diaspora to have a permanent representative in the meetings of African Head of States, where that representative, even if it's in a rotation, once from the Caribbean, once from the US, once from Brazil, once extra, that African diasporan leader will take the floor like any other African leader. You know, he or she will represent our people from the diaspora and will be allowed to be a full member, not an observer or a guest, but a full member of our deliberation and be able to take the floor and state the views of our people in the diaspora. So I hope we will have all the support we need in Addis Ababa. We will lobby for it, we will do the diplomatic groundwork, and we hope that this will be adopted without many difficulties. And we hope we have all the rights to believe that it's going to go through, because if you remember in November, we had this diaspora meeting in South Africa. I think President Mbeki is doing also a good job recognizing that African Americans, African Caribbeans, and so on have helped free South Africa. They were integral part of the fight to free Africa from apartheid. So today there is a recognition, and South Africa is with us in this struggle to recognize the role and contribution of the diaspora. So they called the ministerial meeting. Senegal was there, very supportive of South Africa's effort. And then we'll have a summit of head of state. But what I urge you to do is that, I don't think it's saying something bad about some of our colleagues, but we should not accept what I call double talks. Like, people want the diaspora to know that today they are welcomed and they are invited to be part of this process. But at the same time, some people are still very scared, and some people are not ready to go all the way. So you need to identify countries in Africa that are ready to go all the way and back those countries and give them all the support they need. When I raised the issue of dual citizenship for Africans in the diaspora, and when I said that Senegal was ready to study the question, and I have already, under the instruction of President Abdoulai Wade, given the diplomatic passports of Senegal to some scholars from Africans in the diaspora, and that we are ready even to go even further. Some of our constitutions to prevent dual citizenship is like Africans who wanted to be French or British, and then be also, they do not renounce to their privilege during the colonial time, and at the same time they want to have dual, the national citizenship. We have kind of closed our constitution against dual citizenship. But now that the issue of the diaspora is very clear in our mind, then we have to find a way to change this, saying that an African who was born in Senegal, who goes to France and become a French citizen, and then come back to be also a Senegalese citizen, we are against. But an African who is born in the diaspora, who is an African diasporan, a diasporan African in the Caribbean, in the US, in Canada, in Brazil, if they request a dual citizenship, it should be given consideration. I think we should change our laws to adjust to that reality. Now, if we have the United States of Africa, then I think the issue is resolved. But before we get there, let's try to make African Americans feel at home, African Caribbean, African Brazilian, when they come to Africa. President Wade, we have discussed the issue. I think we will try to put some big step forward on that issue, the issue of visa for Africans in the diaspora. If they are to be the sixth region, and if Senegal wants to maintain the initiative and the leadership on the issue, we should we should get rid of visa for Africans from the diaspora. It is very difficult to understand that a French man or a British man can come to Senegal without a visa, but African American or African Canadian or African Afro-Brazilian have to go and get a visa. So the only problem is we have to make sure that, for instance, in Brazil, if we get rid of the visa for Afro-Brazilian, how do we treat the other Brazilians? So, but that, our legal advisors will think about a way to go around the difficulty. But something that was already said to our police officers at the airport, and I hope they apply it. And every time I was informed, sometimes I drove my car straight to the airport because we are in Africa. Sometimes we have to take care of the problem that way. President Wade has given strong instructions that all people of African descent and people of the African continent who come to Dakar and realize that they did not secure their visa should be allowed in, and then the visa issue will be taken care of later. I hope we find a way to make people understand why we're doing this. It is extremely important to us. Finally, one big problem that we have is we don't trust ourselves enough. We have too many scarce injuries from history and our recent history, the last 500 years. People are trying to identify African people with the suffering of slavery, of colonization. And then before slavery and colonization, for them, it was total darkness in Africa. There was nothing. And some of our people believe that. So all the work of Cheikh Tidiane, should be taken fully into account. Today, some white European scholars are now struggling to get the legacy of the Egyptian people as being their legacy.